Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to this mocap session. As Antonella said, it's not really a beginner session, but I think it's very useful anyway. I mean, even if it may be a bit too advanced for your level, I think it's a good idea to just have a look into this thing because motion capture is surrounded by a lot of fears, but in practice, they come from the fact that you may not know the workflow very often. So this, even if you are a beginner, I encourage you to at least have a look at it, just so that you know what you're talking about when you talk about mocap. Right now, we are going to start. Of course, we're not going to operate a suit. We are going to see how the data is once you have it in your scene and how you can manage it easily, and the way you can control your animation despite the huge amount of keys that you see in here. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the you can put them in the chat while I explain. Even if you need some clarifications about what you see on screen, you can just put them in the chat, and I will keep an eye on it. So if you have any questions, just shoot. About me, I've been animating I started animation, I think it was the early 2000s, and I animated in visual effects, films, and full CG feature films, some video games, promotional videos, um, a bunch of things, TV ads as well. So I've been around for a while, and in the past years, I've been mostly teaching animation. I've taught in a few schools, and right now I'm teaching at Escape Studios. So this is more or less my story. I started as a CG generalist for a very short time. I was a CG generalist. I was IT first, not in CG, just unrelated IT stuff. And then I moved on to character animation, where I spent a lot of years just doing character animation. Then at a certain point, I felt the need to go back to be a generalist. So I did a lot more generalist stuff. And of course, in the meantime, I took some stops on TV ads and video games. So this is my showreel. I will be super quick. You don't need to watch it all. And I'll post in the chat the address to my showreel if you want to see it again. There you go. And now let's get started. So in here, what we have is some animation which is driven by mocap. So the mocap suit created the data, and the data was, we say, retargeted to the character. The process of retargeting is usually done, if you don't have any tool, is usually done in Maya through the Human IK tool, and it results in your controls on the rig inheriting the keys. So that's about it. Of course, there's a lot more surrounding it. We are in this demo, we are past that stage of retargeting. We have our animation on screen, and we just want to deal with it. So first thing first, we have our animation in here. Let's see what we can do with it. If you grab any, in fact, let's have a look and look at a test first. So I prepared a test just for you guys. The problem is, this is the walk. This is the walk. So is this the animation test? No, this is the walk. Sorry, I have 3-4 Mayas open, and I will open up the test on one of them. There you go. So let's have a look at this test so that you see what we're talking about when we deal with mocap. And we start from something a bit basic. So in here we have a character walking around and looking, and then walking some more. Whenever you grab any control in mocap, so let's say I grab this arm, if you don't find keys, it means that the animation wasn't retargeted to that arm, or to that control. But if you grab another control, you will find that there are keys, and there are keys onto every single frame. That's usually what triggers fears in animation. You have so many keys now, and you don't know how to fix that stuff. If they ask you to change it, it's very difficult to change it. Another thing is, let's say that you have, for instance, to change the posture of the character. Very often what happens in mocap is that you get your animation, say this is the walk, and then the director realizes that that character there is really not doing what he was supposed to be doing. So right now, all of a sudden, you find yourself having to change the pose of the character, the body language of the character. So how do we do that? Now, the cheapest way to change body language of a character is to use animation layers. So let's start by with the very basic tools of managing motion capture, animation layers. So let's say that the director said this walk is actually quite okay, but the character looks too evolved. And it happened to me. I worked on a movie where the characters were done in motion capture, but they needed to look a bit unevolved. So the first thing you really had to do every time you had to deal with mocap with animation was to change the pose of the character. But the problem is that if you grab the spine control, you see that every time you have a frame, you have also a key. So if I now move, say I make him hunched, I have two problems. One is that now he's hunched, so it looks a bit less evolved, so to speak, but the next frame it will go back. So in practice, I would have to move every single key there, to tweak every single key, and you see it yourself, not really a good idea. You could do it by, say, if you wanted him to be a bit more hunched towards the front, you could do it by going into the graph editor. And in the graph editor, you would find the curve of your control that moves, that rotates the character forward, say rotate Z, and then you grab all of the keys, all of them, and you just move them. Oops, sorry, and you just move them up or down, you see? And this way you're retargeting, in a way, you're shifting the whole animation. If I now press play, he will be hunched the whole time. Now that doesn't always work though. So let's see if there is a better way to do it. And also, as I did that, another problem showed up. You see that as I rotate the spine, you see that the arm in there loses its curvature. So it used to be a straight arm, but if I rotate the chest this way, you see that the hand is staying there. It doesn't move at all. So now if let's say that as an absurd scenario, let's say that I rotate the torso in such a way. Ooh, that's crazy. I rotate the torso this way, and now that's my animation. See that? I have exactly the same mocap animation. It looks a bit funnier, but exactly the same. But you see that now the arm is no longer straight, so it doesn't look natural anymore. Not that the rest of the body looks natural, of course, but at least earlier on it looked like something. Now the arm is not really clear. So one of the problems you have is that you would need to change the position, the pose, the posture of the torso, but you can't quite do it because the moment you do it, you're messing up the arm. So I find that when I deal with mocap and I need to find the posture of the character as a first step, it's a good idea to convert that animation into FK rather than IK. Right now, the animation is in IK. So if I grab the wrist, you see I move the whole structure around and the arm bends. But usually what we do in animation, and I will only bake down a portion of it so that you see what we have, is we run a script to bake the animation down. So I wrote my own script for this rig. Usually in production, you have scripts that bake the animation, and I'm going to just paste it there. It's going to be, hopefully it's going to be working okay. That's my script in there. In fact, probably I can just drag it there onto my shelf. And now let's see how this works. Usually converters, they're called FK to IK converters. You select a control, you run the script, Maya runs through the timeline. If it doesn't throw an error like it did in my case because I'm silly, I forgot something. But otherwise, it will just run through the timeline. It will calculate the motion of the arm in IK, and then it will convert that animation, hopefully, to FK. And in fact, you see that now, this stage, you see that the animation is exactly the same as it was earlier on, but now you see that the IK control is gone, and we have FK instead. We have a bunch of keys, but FK. Now, the beauty of it is that since it's FK, when I rotate the torso, you see that the position, the general economy of the arm is maintained. And that's because it is indeed FK. I could do the same thing with this guy. But before doing that, I want to check something else. Now, when I rotate the chest forward, I have a different problem. So earlier on, when I was trying to get to a posture which looked a bit more hunched, I had the problem of sorting out all the keys at once, and I found a solution in Graph Editor, but I will show you a way to do it with layers. Now, And the other problem I had at that stage was that when I rotated the chest, the arm would suddenly bend. It wouldn't work anymore. So that was really annoying. And I solved that by converting it to FK. And now I have a third issue. When I work in FK, you see that I keep the internal pose of the arm, but I don't keep the orientation. That's a bummer. Usually in advanced rigs, but even nowadays, even mid-level rigs, you will find an attribute on the controller on the shoulder that can convert your space to global or to well, to global, I would say, or to space rotation. So that what does it mean? It means if I set it on, I mean, apart from the weird rotation that the arm gets, you see that as I set it on, and now when I rotate the chest, you see that the arm keeps the internal economy and also keeps global orientation. So that seems to me that could be the holy grail of what I'm looking for, because that means I could reposition the whole spine without really changing the internal economy of the arm, which is really good because it means I'm not destroying the mocap, which is valuable data. It looks okay. I mean, the arms looked quite okay to me, apart from a couple of glitches. I just didn't want to have to reanimate them. You have to imagine that everything you break from the mocap, you will have to reanimate it. And it will need to look quite high fidelity. So it's not a good idea in general to do the first steps by destroying the animation, but you should try and not destroy it instead. So let's see what happens on the other arm. I would like to try and convert the other arm to global before, because you see that now when I convert this to global, you see that it doesn't quite work. So I want to see if I can do it with this rig. I'm not sure I will be able to, by the way, but let's see. I enable I go back to FK and I set the global to 10. So now the arm is in global. It doesn't have any animation, okay? And the rotation is all messy. See that? Not very good animation, so to speak. So now I check the rotation just to see if they work. And you see that the arm is indeed in global. And now I've set the arm to global. I want to see if my script can do the magic and convert it even to global. I'm not sure I tested it. I think I did, but I'm not really sure. Let's try. I will execute the script. It's, of course, since I didn't open a window that I was supposed to open, it's not going to run, but now I execute the script. Now I'm really curious to see if this will work. If it works, we have spared ourselves a little bit of a step in there. Now, when I grab the chest and then rotate it, you see the arm is in global. That's great, because that means, like for the right arm, that when I rotate the chest, the elbow to shoulder corner is going to stay the same. It's not going to change. And that's very good, because it means we're keeping the mocap there. Let's see if it's in global, and it is in global indeed. So we managed to convert it to global. So something tells me that I could do the same for this guy, for instance. I could go back to IK and then go back to FK. And I don't know if you start seeing a pattern in here, but in practice, we don't really care about how much data we generate on the timeline for as long as that data is controllable. So if we don't like something, we're just going to convert to a system that is easier to maintain. So if IK is going to give us a problem, we're going to convert it to FK. So for instance, if the global setting here is a problem, what we're going to do is we're going to again do a conversion, this time to FK, this time to IK, so that we get back the old controllers, the one on the wrist, the little cube that we had on the wrist. Just a second while Maya thinks about it. And then once we will be back into IK, we're going to switch the global setting to 10, and that will give us the global rotation. And then we're going to convert animation back from IK to FK. I'm sure I'm confusing some people here. That's why I said at the beginning, it's a good thing to watch if you're a beginner, but you won't probably remember everything. So in here, now that I have my animation converted to IK, I can set this thing to global, and I can go back to see the IK control, and I can do another bake. Now Maya is supposed to run the script again, and hopefully it will convert the animation back to FK, and this time around the global is set to 10. So if you have in any production, there should be, if it's an animation studio, there should be an IK to FK converter waiting for you right there. If there isn't, you probably should script it. You should learn to script it, because you see that just right now, by converting everything to global, I already spared myself a lot of hours of work in which I will not have to fix the arms anymore, which is, let's say it, a relief. Because if I had to fix the arms manually, I would be in big troubles, I think. I'm going to save this thing as my mocap demo. So 001, this is the A version, let's say. There you go. And I'm going to go back to what I wanted at the beginning. The director, remember, said, I want the posture, he said, to be more unevolved or less evolved. Let's see how that's done. Earlier on, I realized that the moment I did that, I lost the arm internal economy, but now I recovered it through a couple of technical tricks. So if I want the guy to look more unevolved, a bit more monkey-like, I should probably select all of the spine controls, whichever contributes to the pose of the character, including the neck joints and the neck controls and the head controls. I can go into the layer box in Maya and I can add them onto a layer. Now, I never really put all the controls on a layer, all of them on a rig, because a rig can have hundreds of controls. And layers don't slow down really. Even if you have hundreds of controls on them, they don't really slow down your scene that much. But when you bake them down, when you merge those layers, it's going to take a while if you have too many controls. So I only put on the layers the controls that I need. So for a character, I set a key on that layer, and look at that. For a character to look unevolved, all I need is to maybe lower the root a bit and move the bum a little bit to the back, and then grab the chest and spine control, and I'm just going to rotate them forward quite a lot until I get a hunched look. The problem is that the head tends to go down because it's right now it's following the chest, but I can just move it up a little bit and set a key. And now maybe I can also rotate this guy up. And now the beauty of layers is that that offset, you see, is applied to the whole animation. So now the character looks a lot less evolved if you think of it. And the only thing we did was we changed the posture. In fact, nailing the body language before you even do the technical cleanup of the mocap is quite important. And before changing the body language, you have to make sure that as you change the body language of the spine, you do not break the internal economy of other limbs like the arms, for instance. So this is quite a useful technique. Now let's have a look at some issues that are occurring in this animation. One of the problems of mocap is usually noise. You might have glitches like, for instance, this one every now and then. So all of a sudden you have a sudden key, or very often you have a lot of noise in the feet. But nowadays, you see, for instance, down here, we have the foot going down. You see, it goes into the floor and then comes back up. This is all normal stuff for mocap. Even modern mocap has this issue really. So one way to look at it is to call it noise. If you grab the root control, for instance, the control that moves around the whole mocap, and you check the graph editor there, you will find that, let's open up the graph editor in all of its splendor. You will find that this animation is quite clean. There is some noise here and there, a little bit of zigzagging curves in there, but overall is quite clean. Let's say that you're not satisfied with the amount of noise. So let's say that this curve is not smooth enough for you. You always have to check in the viewport if that's really a problem, because maybe it isn't. Let's assume it's not really a problem in this case, but let's assume it is. One thing you can do to remove that noise is to go under curves, and you have something called the Butterworth filter there. The Butterworth filter, I will execute it while I keep the curve visible on screen a bit bigger so that you see what it does. It sort of smooths down the curve, you see? It tends to remove the bumps in the curve. It's really useful for motion capture, but you should know when to apply it. You just can't grab an animation and just apply a filter like that. It would be the equivalent of opening up a Photoshop picture and applying an indiscriminate blur to the whole picture to remove a couple of spots. Yeah, it will remove the spots probably, but also everything else. So you want to be very careful, especially considering that, for instance, in this particular case, the mocap kit I used to record this data was an Xsense suit, this kind of product. And Xsense suits, for instance, they come with already their denoiser. That would be true also for the Rococo suit. not Rocco's suit, but the Rococo suit, this product in here instead, which also comes with its own denoise software. So in practice, what I'm getting at is that most mocap suits, they already come with their denoise system. The data they record goes first into their software, gets denoised in there, and then you export it to Maya. So you don't. That means that the days when you had to denoise mocap by default are gone. There you might still get very noisy mocap, but in general, the mocap quality is much higher nowadays. By the way, the suits you're seeing in here are called inertial suits. They're portable suits. They don't need a studio. They're based on gravitometers and magnetometers. That means that they measure the gravity field of Earth, and they also have accelerometers, which I don't know if it's a gravitometer. I don't remember now. All these fancy words, they they cloud my mind. So, but in any case, I think they are the entry level of suits. They're very useful because they're portable. You don't need a set to be permanently set up to use them. So very, very useful stuff. So now we were saying we made him unevolved, but there is some noise. In this case, there is a bit of a glitch. If you have only a single glitch like this one, the fastest way to get rid of it is literally to get rid of the key. And if you get rid of the key, you see that now you don't have it anymore, and it works pretty well. Now you see that at the beginning, the chest does a sudden drop forward, and the arms also are suffering. They kind of become stretched. A cheap way to fix this thing would be to do what we call to bake the animation every 2-3 frames. So we can go and grab the controls that are the offending controls. It's usually a good idea if you plan to bake the arms on 2, it's usually a good idea to bake the chest as well on 2, just so that they bake on the same keys and you won't have counteracting motion coming out from somewhere. So let's say I select all those top controls. I just disable the layer for a second. I want to see the result in here. And I'm going to go under Edit, Keys, Bake Simulation. And in there, I'm going to tell Maya, you know what? All these keys, all these controls, I would like you to bake them every 2 frames. So sample by 2. I hit apply. And now you see that I don't have, well, I still have them. I was about to say, you see that I don't have keys anymore, but I still have keys, which is a bit of a surprise for me because normally you don't have keys. Let me try with a single hand to see what's the problem there. I suspect the layer may have something to do with it. So I sample over 2, every 2. There you go. There's this tick box, keep unbaked keys. If I disable it, it's still keeping it. What's going on? Let me reset. Let me check. There you go. Now it works. With the default settings, it works. So I will do the same for all the controls that I had selected earlier on. So hopefully that will work. So we'll bake them on 2. And now the effect of this is that you won't see much of the, much of a difference, but the animation will be a lot smoother because now you won't have every other key will go and you won't have them. So if there was any noise, that's a very brutal way of cleaning animation. It sort of works. It introduces a problem, of course. If you check the arms, you see that every now and then they sort of go the opposite way. That's quite funny. You don't have to worry about that too much, though. You have to understand a couple of things about rotations. Sometimes Maya, when interpolating between one pose and another, which, the poses look pretty similar, it's interpolating in a very weird way. And that happens because of a number of reasons. It's especially common in mocap, but you don't have to worry. The solution to that issue is to run what's called an Euler filter, or I guess if you're German, Euler, that would be probably the pronunciation. I don't know. Just lived there for a year and my German still is not very good at all. So you see that every now and then the rotation suddenly changes direction quite abruptly, although the pose stays the same. The pose is essentially the same, but the animation is rotating by 360 degrees. How do we fix that? The cheap way is select your curves. You don't have to select all keys. If you select a key per each curve, it will do the job regardless. It will just recalculate the whole curve. You go under curves and you go Euler filter. This way you see that the curves are now nice and smooth. They are properly calculated, and most of the time this solution just works. See that? Kind of works. Not too bad, not too bad. For something that comes for free, I'm quite impressed. So now that problem with the elbows stretching forward, I can say, you know what? I really like that curvature of the elbow. I don't want it to stretch. And what I can do maybe is I can delete all the keys of the elbows until they go back to be bent. So now as I press play, you see that in there, it kind of works, but I think there was a bigger issue on the arm in there. So I want to find, yes, the arms were suddenly rotating forward. That's probably because of some noise I introduced. So we'll just delete those keys, and now everything should be a lot gentler. So you don't have to be afraid of deleting keys, but you still have to be careful. You can't just go around and delete random keys. You always have to check the result. You see that now the result is quite okay. See that? So a friend of mine just finished working on Cyberpunk, that last video game, which has a massive amount of mocap. And he was telling me about how much mocap they had to clean. So this will be much the same job that I'm doing here, except probably done in a faster way because they have so much mocap to clean that they can't really afford, I think, to to spend too much time on it. Now that I've cleaned my mocap, the arms are looking okay, and the body is looking okay, and I can re-enable the unevolved pose. Please notice that most mocap gears don't have fingers. You will have to buy additional gloves if you want to record that data. It's not really included in the regular packages. So now if you think of it, we have our unevolved look, and the character is walking around. That's quite okay. I think that's quite an achievement for something that took us just under 20 minutes to fix. And please notice, I haven't lost any significant data. You may ask yourself, why did we not bake onto the feet? We don't bake the feet onto usually because you're not sure ever if it's going to create additional sliding on the feet. What happens, for instance, if I delete this key? You see that, well, apart from the unfriendly Euler rotation, which I'm going to fix with a Euler filter, you see that the foot will start translating forward. So the problem there is that by baking the animation on feet, you risk to compromise the contact poses, which if they are quite good, you want to keep, because fixing sliding feet is not a massive issue, it's not so difficult, but at the same time, it is also time consuming. So it's more of a matter of time rather than anything else. So now let's find a place where the character goes under the floor, like in here, for instance, and let's see how you fix sliding feet. There is a bunch of AI software, I think, nowadays that is trying to fix this problem, and I think they're managing quite all right. Until that is introduced into a commercial software, you have to resort to some trickery of some sort. Usually what I do to clean a foot which is sliding is I just grab the foot when it touches the floor and it's flat on the floor, and I mark down in my mind, or better on paper with a pen, paper, there you go, the old way, I mark down the number, that's 530. You can also download the script of Maya that gives you a color on the key in there in the timeline, so that this way you will remember visually. That's probably easier than writing down on paper, I suppose. And then I would like that foot to stay there until, say, until, in fact, it's going to stay there until the end. So I want to, so it was 530. I want all these frames to be, just a second, I want all these frames to be the same. I want the foot not to move. Then you see it moves again later on. Now the problem, and this is a bunch of keys, there's really a lot of keys in here. The problem is that I could normally, you would grab 530 and just duplicate it, delete everything in the middle, and you will have the same keys. And that's quick enough. It's not really dramatically slow, but there is another method that I use that I think is very useful. I use a tool called Red9 Studio Pack, for which there's a free version and a paid for version. The tool I use is in the free version. I just pasted the link in the chat, and I'm going to see how this works. So I'm going to grab Red9 tools, which are here, I think. There you go. I'm going to open the animation toolkit, and there is a little tool in there which is called Track or Stabilize. Let's see what it does. I'm going to select all the keys for as long as the foot is on the floor, and I will stop just one frame before the foot starts moving. So say before the rotation of the foot, say here, There's one, I will stop one frame earlier, and then I'm going to say process forward. I want to see what happens. And now as I process the timeline, you see that the foot stays there perfectly planted. That's really good. And it's for free. It's a single click. You just have to select the timeline and fix it. As I said, I expect in the next 2-3 years, this thing will be done by a computer. I don't think I need to point out when there is a contact. There used to be a software called Iclone that I think used to be around until Apple bought it. That was doing exactly this kind of stuff. So I expect the technology is there already. Now, the problem you will find is that between the last frame in which you stabilize the foot and the next one, there will be a bit of a sudden movement, right? You can feel there is a bit of a sudden jerk in there, moving up and then rolling forward. So we want to find a way to fix it. The cheapest way I can think of is maybe to, I don't know, duplicate the control temporarily, or even better, let's use another tool so that we learn something new. Instead of duplicating a control, I'm going to use a tool which is called Lock Unlock. You can find it on a website named High-End 3D. I'm going to highendthree-d.com. There you go. This is a very useful website for scripts and resources. A lot of them are for free, in fact. It's a very old one. In fact, it shows a little bit. So let's see what this tool does. The tool is super useful because it lets you, first of all, create a locator at the position of the controller. So I will create a locator. There you go. The locator is there. And then on a layer, I will put that controller on a layer. This is the right foot. And then on a layer, I will set a key on 604 before the foot moves with that little bit of a jump up. Then I will go to 605 when I have the jump, and I will ask Maya to please align that foot to the old locator. So I will just select the foot, select the locator. You can go under Match Transformation, Translation, and Rotation. You don't have to do it from the menu. In fact, I have my own buttons on the shelf, right? Because to me, going there and doing 3 clicks for one tool is just too many clicks. If you can spare yourself 2 clicks out of 3, you're sparing yourself 66% of the work. That means that if you work 9 hours per day, you could work 3 hours. Or if you pay £900 for rent, you could pay 300. I think it's a good trade-off. So now I am going to see that between 604 and 605, the foot is staying perfectly there. And then it starts moving regularly because I've just offset the whole animation. So I just told the layer, look, layer, just keep it there and then do your whole animation as you would do normally. And that would remove automatically the glitch. This is a very useful technique. Of course, when we go to the next contact, we want to go back to where we were earlier on. So I can just zero out the animation there. And now the animation should work. It won't work right now because I have to apply another Euler filter, but it will work. In practice, I could even in this particular case, I could even just key only the translation and not the rotation if I wanted to avoid another Euler filter, and that will work just fine. There you go. That will work just fine. There you go. So that's a way. So let's say that now the director is super happy, but he says, yeah, it's all super cool. Amedeo, really, really good animation. Pixar is ready for you. But the problem is that I really want this first step to be a lot shorter. That's an interesting problem, Mr. Director. How can I make this whole step a lot shorter when I have a key every frame down there? Well, it's easier. Once you understand the basics of animation layers, really this kind of stuff is a known, it's a known problem, I would call it. Let's see how that works. I can put this foot on its own layer again, and then at the beginning of the timeline, I set a key, and then I go to the end, and I find the contact pose, and I just move the foot a lot closer to the body. And now you see that the whole animation is retargeted automatically to land there very close to the body. Not too bad, I would say. Not too bad. It could have been much worse. So this is really a nice way to move your animation around without really having to mess with the keys. So if I wanted the tip of the foot to stay a lot more open throughout the animation, all I need to do, hopefully if it works, is to set a key in there. And now you see that the character, oh, I have I think down there I have a couple of issues with the gimbal lock. You see that now the character lands with the foot outside. So in practice, the only thing you have to keep in mind is gimbal locks and Euler rotations. They can spoil your day. And you see that we are almost never going there and mess with the original data. You can if you want, you can bake it on twos or on three, but you don't really have to go in there and manually tweak every single frame. That would be something close to madness, which of course is never, I mean, maybe it's useful sometimes, I suppose. Now let's say that we have our animation there, everything looks cool, and I would like the character at the beginning to, as he walks, to look towards me, towards the camera. So let's see how that can be done. So but I want to keep the same head animation as before. So let's see how that can be done. That's super easy. I select the controllers for the neck and the head, and then again on a layer, please notice how much I'm using layers. Again on a layer, as he walks, I'm going to set a key at a certain point, and then maybe as he stops, as he's about to stop, I'm going to rotate, there you go, the head that way. Now there you go, something like this will work. And now you see that I keep exactly the same animation, but it's looking somewhere else. This is, by the way, something that is used very often. Animation layering of this kind is used in a lot of video games. It comes to my mind The Witcher 3 from Project Red, where you have a lot of cinematics and people talking all the time, and in those situations there is some animation layering going on in game that lets the character looks sideways or in another direction. So now let's see what else we can do in here. And as the guy is going back to his pose, you see that the pose is breaking, but we can just go in there and we can use the zero key layer to, you see, to go back and look in the other direction. So the animation will be different between 532 and 544, but after that it will go back to the old direction, to the old look. And now you have the animation there. It's really, really a handy way of doing stuff, I think. So we have seen how to change the posture, which is probably the first thing you want to do with Mocap. We have seen that it's a good idea to be able to quickly swap between FK and IK and global and local rotation. And we have seen how to add variations through layers and then create new motion. It's really, really a useful way of working. Now, one last thing I would like to do maybe is to see if we can change the global to local orientation of a controller manually without resorting to a converter, just to see the logic behind it. To people who have been working in the industry for a while, this is common practice. But if you have just started and you know how to animate, but you don't know all the tricks, this can be a useful tool. So let's say that now the head, when I rotate the chest, the head is moving 1 to 1, but I would really like the head to stay global. There is a global switch in there, but you see what it does. It sort of rotates the head back. I guess I could just put it on a layer, set the global to 10, just counter rotate the head until it is straight. And I guess that should be enough, you see, to have the head more or less in the same position, but at the same time, keep it in global. However, this is not always possible, especially if you're rotating the character this way. You see that the head stays global, so that's a bit of a problem later on. So usually it's a better idea to just convert it to global from the get-go, so that you keep it straight the whole time. Or rather, you keep the animation, but if you change the orientation of the chest, you're not going to change the orientation of the head. Let's see how to build a switcher ourselves. So I will go back, I will remove this layer, I don't really need it. I will go back, and if I set the global to 10, you see the head moves around. So I would need a way to store this animation somewhere, convert the animation to global, and then recall the animation. One thing I would really like you to notice is that the values that you have in rotation up there, when we swap to global, don't change at all. That means that if your idea was to save the animation to a tool like, I don't know, Studio Library, for instance, which is a super useful tool to save animation, really, really useful. The problem is that it stores data like most tools of this kind. It stores data based on the numbers these controls have in here. But these numbers are always relative to whichever parent space is above them. And in this particular case, as you see, when I move to the global to 10, they don't really change. That means that even if I imported the animation, uh, even if I exported the animation, changed the global setting to 10, and then imported it back, I would still have the same issues. So I want to find a way to change the global to 10 without changing the animation. First of all, you want to store your animation. So let's see how the animation can be stored. So earlier on, remember I stored the position of a foot onto a locator. I wonder if I can do the same with the head, but with the whole animation. And in fact, if you grab the lock unlock tool, which you can find on high-end 3D, you can just make sure you're baking the animation. You see the button here. And now the locator will be matching you see it's moving with the head. And now you will have, as a result, a locator. I will make it bigger so that it's a bit easier to see. You will have a locator there. There you go. That moves exactly like the head. Very, very useful. And now and it's in global space. You see it's up here. It's not really, its values are not even the same values the head has, because they're not under the same space. If you look at the head, you see that in here the head is under some other groups, so it's inheriting some other values. So now that I have that animation stored, I can maybe set the head to global. It would be a good idea to bake down this animation before we do that. And in fact, it's a good idea to have a look at what do we do with layers. Let's say the animation we are at a good point with the animation and we don't need those layers anymore, or they became a problem like this case, for instance. Well, you want to bake them down, you want to merge them down. To do that, you select them all, and you just right click and go into the options on merge layers, and you make sure that the smart bake is on. Smart bake is a very useful tool because it makes sure you don't add additional keys. It will try to bake down your animation. I hope it doesn't crash, of course. It will try to bake down your old animation without adding any new key, if possible, just by using the existing keys. You may say, but yeah, we have already a key every frame, so what is really the difference in here? It depends on the situation. Now it's doing its math. I guess we have to give it some room to breathe, but maybe while I wait, I will do the job on another Maya because I don't want to wait for too long. So let's switch this thing from global 0 to global 10 and still keep the animation as I did earlier on. Lock on lock, bake the animation, start, and now it's going to bake the whole animation again on a locator. So you see it needs to go through the whole timeline. Remember that when you bake, any part of the timeline which is not visible won't even be baked. So you won't have animation past 5 to 6 in here on the locator. In fact, if I grab the locator, which is hidden into the head in there, I'm going to make it again a lot bigger so that you see it. If you grab the locator in there and you go past 5 to 6, you see there's nothing there. So just keep that in mind. Any baking operation destroys data by default outside the boundaries of a timeline. So now I'm going to grab the head in there. I'm going to convert that to global. And that's kind of okay because I have the animation on the locator. And then I'm going to grab the head and constrain it to the locator. That could work. So if I grab the head as I grab the locator as a master. So the constraint operation works with master first. Then I don't really need to see the lights. Then I grab the head and I go constrain, parent, and I don't want to maintain the offset. I want to see if that works. There you go. You see now we're back, except if you check the head, you see in there it's constrained. Now the head is doing exactly what the locator does. And since the locator was moving around, where is it gone? Since the locator was moving around with the head earlier on, now the animation will be exactly the same. Not too bad. Now, of course, I can't touch the head because it's constrained, but I can bake it, right? I can select the rotation and translation, and I can just bake those keys. This button I pressed is a script of mine that bakes the animation, but really it's only running a couple of things that you can also find under the bake simulation tool, which is the one we've seen earlier on under keys bake simulation. It's essentially rephrasing that tool, nothing really fancy going on in there. So now if I delete the constraint under this controller, hopefully I should get the same animation. Let's see what happens if you see if I move the locator, see there, nothing really happens because now the animation of the head is stored onto the head itself again. And that means that I can delete the constraint. And now I have converted, this is called a space conversion sometimes, or space switch, or changing the space of an object, changing the rotation space, translation space. It has to do with space. There are many names. I'm not really sure what's the most used one. I call it a space switch anyway. So now we converted the global to 10 and we kept the same animation. So that means that, again, just like we did earlier on with the arm, you see that the head stays global. So really the key here to a quick and flexible workflow is the ability to convert the way controllers operate and just take advantage of these ways of working of the controllers so that you only devote your time to something you really like, not to, I don't know, fine tuning every single key, but rather to nailing the general character of the animation. Now, I think that a tool that is very useful in these cases, that is very useful to convert a space, is Morgan Loomis's space converter. I think it's called World Bake, this guy in here. I'm going to paste the link in here. It's for free. It's a very useful tool. You should probably be using it because it spares you a lot of time. And it does, in a nutshell, what I just did with the locators, except it does it with one click and on multiple controls at any given time. Please notice that you will have to install ML utilities for it to work. It won't work on its own. It's a super useful tool. It should be in your array. It's really, really useful. It doesn't work with all the rigs. It works with most rigs, but it doesn't work. For instance, this rig in here is made with Advanced Skeleton, which is a great automatic rigging machine. So with Advanced Skeleton, let me just bring it up for you. Advanced Skeleton is a rigging machine that lets you rig a character in a matter of minutes without you having to do much. You just have to specify where the joints are, and then the script does most of the work. It even does facial rigging. It has the issue of being a bit old, of course, so it's not industry standard anymore. But if you have, and it's free, one, and if you have no way to quickly rig a character, that's a good way to do it. So I use Advanced Skeleton a lot when I don't have time and the rig doesn't need to be particularly advanced. And to be honest, Advanced Skeleton is quite advanced in my opinion in terms of flexibility of the controls. So I can't complain about how good that thing is. It's a good tool. So I was saying, however, that it's a tool that it was written many years ago. We are talking now about 20 years ago, and some of the stuff it does is not anymore industry standard. So some of the modern tools won't work with it. And Morgan Loomis's World Bake is one such tools. So you just need to be aware of it, in which case you can use the locator method. It still works. Now, another thing that you might find useful is FBX Review. It's a free software from Autodesk. It lets you drag FK chains that are contained in Mocap, and you can evaluate them in here without having to open Maya. It's a very useful preview tool. You can consider it some sort of image preview windows, but for free this stuff. It will open any FBX data. It's really, really useful. And again, it's for free. I'm going to post the link in here as well. And finally, where do you find mocap data if you don't really have a mocap suit? I mean, let's say you don't want to spend, I don't know, $3,000 on a suit. Where do you find that data? Well, if you don't have a mocap suit, the first stop is Miximo. The Miximo website is a website in which you can access for free a structure containing several motion capture animations. I suspect some of them are actually partly keyframes or entirely keyframes, but most of them are actually motion capture. It doesn't really matter. And you can also apply them to a bunch of characters. So you can, I don't know, you can grab this dance move, and then you can select a different character for it. Now I don't really remember how that's done. I think I can, what was it? I don't really remember. I think I can go to character. Actually, let's go to characters, and I will grab, I don't know, the zombie. You can make it Miximo. And now you see I'm seeing the animation that I selected earlier on. So it is a very quick tool to do stuff. And you can also update and you can also upload your own character, and Miximo will rig it for you. It will add the joints. The process is quite automated, and you will get a joint chain out of it. In the old days, I don't know if this is still the case, Mixamo would also do the actual rig for you, not just the joints, but the controllers. But I'm not sure that's the case. This is a link to Mixamo. I hope you find it useful. I really found it useful when I didn't have access to Mocap. Mixamo was really the place to go to test Mocap out. And sometimes you just need some motion capture in there, but it's really useful, especially if you're doing a lot of those videos, those low fidelity videos you find on YouTube with 3D avatars telling a story in a game engine. They're done using libraries of Mocap like this one. They're not very refined maybe in terms of rendering or animation, but that's not the point, is it? I mean, they're trying to build a story there, so it's a very different endeavor they're invested in. So I think this will be it. I know it's at the same time a lot and not enough. I think it is a lot for those who already worked with Mocap or who never worked with Mocap, and it's not enough for those who worked with Mocap. I try to keep both spectrums of the range, both extremes of the range a bit interested. I hope I gave every personality something new to consider. I hope so anyway. If you have any questions, I would be open to answer questions. In fact, it would be fun. So if you have any questions, you can maybe write them either in the question and answer section or in the chat itself. And in the meantime, I will keep clicking into my Maya because I want to see a couple of things about this rig. I keep saying rig, guys, because this is indeed the rig. A rig is the combination of joints and the controllers. So if I go into the rig itself, let me just find the deformation system there. That's the joint. Let me just, it's somewhere. I'm not sure if I can unlock it from here. Let's see. I should be able. There you go. Joint visibility. So the stuff that Mixamo gives you is this joint chain that you see here in the viewport. This is the joint chain, and this is usually the joint chain that you get from Mixamo or from any Mocap library. If you Google motion capture clips, you will find a lot of this stuff, and this stuff is used to drive your character. And just a second, and I see some questions as well, and then you will retarget with the human AK. Usually that's the procedure. It's worth mentioning, guys, that the advanced skeleton tool also has the ability to import Mocap onto your rig without you having to know much. There are plenty of tutorials online. It's very easy. I really suggest you have a look at it because that's a good entry point, I think. So Christy is asking, have you worked with Mocap from animals, maybe dogs? And do you use any different workflow for this? So no, I've never worked with Mocap for animals and in general quadrupeds, but I know that it's used. So for instance, I think 1010 movie, 1010, the movie of 1010, this one has a mocap dog probably, and also a mocap cat. I'm quite sure about it. I'm sure that the latest Lion King from MPC, I think, might have some mocap here and there for some of the quadrupeds. So, but in general, the process would not change. The main difference it would be that the root of a quadruped would be oriented in a different way. Say this way, it would be just, or you would have imagined I know in here it looks a bit strange, but imagine that would be the quadruped, right? So you would just have to animate to clean the stuff from this perspective, but you will still have to make sure that, I think you would want, in that case for the quadruped, you will want the limbs to stay in IK because there is contact with the floor. So I think you would want them in IK, not FK, as I said earlier on. But you will still apply the same principles we discussed. I think that would be the main change. Of course, I'm pretty sure there is a very precise workflow that will make you super fast. But I think these in general indications will be very useful. Then Joseph is asking, have you seen any films with mocap where you can see some issues with the animation? Of course, I mean, right now the level of animation is incredibly better than it used to be. But in the old days, there were movies, Monster House being one of them, where there was a lot of mocap animation. In fact, it was entirely mocap animation, and you wouldn't. The main problem you have with mocap, with the old mocap animation, is you don't really quite feel that the characters are looking in the right direction for most of the time. They always feel like they're looking somewhere generic, but sometimes they feel a bit blind, and very often the motion looks a bit puppety, especially with the hands, because there was no finger motion capture there. But having said that, that's not entirely a big deal, I have to say, because the movie was quite cool anyway. But you see, the animation is at times a bit harsh. It's not very refined, especially, for instance, this. You see, they feel like a bit of blind puppets. They don't feel there that much, but it doesn't really matter in the context of the movie. It works very well. The movie is fun, and I don't think it's a big deal. But with the old mocap, you will find a lot of this stuff. Another thing that you will find with the old mocap is that most of the characters will have the legs bent, and so it will always feel like they are in some sort of distress, and they have to go to the loo or something. And that's because when you clean the mocap, when you clean bipedal mocap, a walk, for instance, you will, if you raise the root a lot, too much, you will stretch the leg. You see down here, and then when it will bend with a snap. See that? So in the old days, they would just lower the root and call it a day. But you don't walk this way when you walk. Otherwise, you would have immense muscles on the legs. So you still have to find a way, usually for animation layers, to keep your legs straight for the most part. So that's, if you go back and look at the old movies, maybe even the Polar Express, for instance, you will find out that most characters, they walk with bent legs, which is not something you do in real life, but it's easier to clean mocap that way. But so in general, when you look at old movies, you may find problems with mocap, but even in new ones, every now and then you find a couple of things. But new ones are so much better that it's very difficult to even spot the difference between keyframes and mocap in a visual effects movie. And sometimes, even if the character is far away, it's even difficult to spot the difference between a digital and a real character nowadays. So yes, I mean, but if you want to find a problem, you will always find a problem, yeah, right? So you will always see something you don't like. It's a difficult, I think, mocap and animation, it's always going to be an interesting relationship, because it looks very real, but then animation is not exactly the copy of reality. It's more of an interpretation of reality. So, and there's the acting bit involved as well. Then Chris is asking, does facial capture involve a lot of cleanup? Is it normal to act out both body and face at the same time, or are they done separately? That's a very good question, Chris. I worked on a movie which was called John Carter. And on John Carter, face cam, let's see if there is, I'm trying to find John Carter, let's see, movie. So this, I lost, just a second, I lost the movie. There you go. So this was the movie. It was a movie from Disney, and all of these aliens, they used to have an actor on set, so they were shot on set. So they were all on set, not these guys. This is a shot I made, by the way. But now in the trailer, it's a bit difficult. So the characters were on set when they were single characters, not when there was the crowd, and the actors would wear the face cam. So the data would have been recorded at the same time. And I'm not sure I can find the making of, but I think if I say face cam mocap, if I type that on Google, I will have, there you go. And so you would have the character on a set wearing a face cam. Let's get there. So this is more or less the rig you would have while on set. And does it involve a lot of cleanup? The truth is, on John Carter, I remember it didn't really require much cleanup. It was pretty much good to go. It didn't have much. Sometimes you have to add a bit of soft parts because mocap tends to be noisy. So if you had a very, very close up on a movie, you would want to go in there and tweak it. But I think nowadays with especially with Ender's Game, I think they use machine learning. Ender's Game machine learning. I don't remember. Is it Ender's Game? I don't remember the latest Avengers movie. I don't remember the title of the movie. Sorry. I know it's a famous movie, but I don't remember it. But they used a machine learning for this guy, for Thanos. So they did record facial motion capture, and then I think they used machine learning to smooth it. I'm not entirely sure the process, to be honest. I didn't really check the technical details of it, so I would have to watch some making ofs to understand what was going on under the hood. But it's expected that, say, 5 years from now, mocap will be maybe just a base from which to start, but then you will have AI generated animation. I would expect so, in fact. But yeah, but you still require some cleanup. I remember that when they were animating Avatar, they were hiring animators to do specifically facial animation because they had a very good gear, I think, for mocap, but still it doesn't really know what the director wants. It doesn't really know the rules of aesthetics. So you still need to go in there and do some tweaking. It's more tweaking of the poses than cleanup, I would say. So it was a very good question, Chris, in fact. Nowadays, you can do motion capture, facial motion capture with an iPhone or even with Android. So if I go Android, you can just record your face, and Android will have a tool, and you have to download some software that will give you some motion capture. It won't compare in terms of quality to the high end high-end animation you will find in Avengers, but it's a good start. And I remember I used a Kinect sensor from the old Kinect, this guy in here. You can use this guy in there to record data and do facial motion capture. I set up my own motion capture system using Kinect sensors once, and I could do both body and face. Unfortunately, not at the same time. So, have you watched Food Fight? I did watch Food Fight and Killer Bean. They are classics, I think, of CG. Do you have any recommendation for facial capture tools to use at home? Chris, I would really look into phones and software for phones for facial captures. I can't recommend a specific software. You have to test them and see which one works the best for you, because they all promise the moon, but you really have to check what works and what doesn't. I did try this website called Radical that gives you a body motion capture based on a video, and it's sort of okay. It actually does a couple of things. Of course, it's a video, so it doesn't know about 3D animation, 3D movement, but it's quite okay considering it's just a software and it's based on video. So for the body, I would certainly recommend starting with the software, with a software like Radical. But there are the packages as well. You just have to Google, and now they're kind of exploding. Everybody's making one. For the face, I would imagine that there's a software called Iclone, I think. And Iclone lets you, there you go. Iclone lets you interface your phone with a software. And as you talk, it's capable of getting this mockup out for you. So I would probably go down this route if I had to rebuild a mockup gear nowadays. Instead of using the Kinect, I would probably go for a high-end phone in a software like Iclone, I'm pretty sure we'll get quite good results. And not to mention that you can do this whole thing in real time. And with the introduction of MetaHuman, for instance, I don't know if you have seen MetaHuman. Now you could have real-time motion capture, I suppose, like you used to do in Unreal. You will still need software, of course, middleware, and it's going to be applied on an actual very high resolution human. So very useful stuff. And that's it. Any other questions? Nope. I think if there are no questions, or Kirsty is saying people are using MetaHuman with iPhone to get the facial mockup in real time, I believe. I would imagine so. I mean, if I had an iPhone and if I had the software to do facial recognition on an iPhone, it would be the first time I would do if I were playing with Unreal. I would really do that as a first, because it's bound to be fun, and you can do a lot of stuff in Unreal very quickly. So yes, I'm pretty sure they are. I'm not sure MetaHuman is out already. So if they are, it's probably they're probably beta testers. So let me just answer this. So let me think if there are plenty of researches about motion capture, guys, especially concerning using motion capture libraries to drive AI. So you would use a library to generate motion with the AI. And I expect in the next 5 years, we will see a lot of animation generated from a computer. Oh, yes, Alfie Williams, you have signed up for the MetaHuman beta testing. Did you try it? Does it work? Ooh, suspense. I don't know if it works or doesn't. You haven't received the code yet. Oh, you created such expectations, and then no code yet. Just send them something, a reminder or something. I think it would be cool. I wonder. I think I'm more interested in knowing if this MetaHuman thing can be sent outside Unreal. I mean, can we have an FBX of that model? Because it's really useful. It spares you sometimes to have a human model pre-modeled, so that you don't have every time to model something from scratch. Don't worry, Alfie. Let me know. I mean, it would be fun to know what's going on, what you managed to do, and so forth. I expect there will be a lot of bugs. There used to be I think there's a software called Character Creator. Let's see, Character Creator. Yeah, there you go. It still exists. So Character Creator is somehow the older brother to MetaHuman. It's a software that lets you build characters pretty quickly, and you can export them. I think you can export them as FBX. So it has a builder with assets that you can change. So it is the previous. Imagine this was made long time ago. So I'm going to paste this link in the chat as well. I used Adobe Fuse. I used Adobe Fuse as well when it was around. It was okay. I didn't particularly like the models, but at the time it was the only thing I could have access to, and it was quite useful. I had to do some previews, and I needed some 3D models, 3D characters, really quick with a joint chain, and character and Adobe Fuse was doing the trick. I don't think it's sold any longer. I don't think Adobe Fuse is existing any longer. I don't think so. Yeah, I think they're going to embed it into something else, because I haven't seen it around for a while. Cool. So I think if there isn't any other question, I will call it an evening. It was fun. Actually, we managed to have a little bit of a conversation in the end, and that was great. Kirsty is saying, thank you very much for the talk, tips and tricks. And previewing FBX files, yes, definitely definitely a useful thing. You don't want to open all this stuff in Maya all the time. It's better to have a viewer, just like you would want to have a viewer for pictures. You don't want to open everything in Photoshop. And use FBX review. There are other tools around. I mean, I would say that probably Motion Builder is the fastest I know to open up FBX stuff, but the review is just quite useful. It just spares you the hassle of opening stuff. You just drag stuff over it and it works. No problem, Joseph. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So, well, have a good night then.